Thank you very much, Steffi. Welcome to everyone, and I hope and I think this will be the most electrifying panel you're going to have this year. We are talking about the holy grail of energy, so to say, because fusion is the one promise we have for clean and abundant energy. And this could really, as you asked for that, revolutionize the world, help us in Germany, because we need energy desperately, and really be a striking new industry. But let me not take the time from these stellar people we have here who discuss with us, who are going to answer this. Let me shortly introduce him. Markus, you have already, no need to introduce you. But we have Antonia here. Antonia is Innovation Manager at SPRIND, which is the Federal Agency for Disruptive Innovation. So for everyone who is non-German, non-European, I think that's a very strong message that we have the SPRIND and that we have someone like Antonia there who has a background as a physicist, and she's also heading the agency subsidiary to develop laser systems for fusion energy. Then we have Heike Freund, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Marvel Fusion, a Munich startup in the field here of laser, cutting-edge laser technology in the field. And Francesco, who's heading Proxima Fusion, which is, oh, sorry, didn't I mention Marvel Fusion? Heading Proxima Fusion as a spin-off, the first spin-off of the Max Planck Institute in the field of magnet fusion, also Munich-based. So this also gives a proof to what Markus said. You know, we have a great situation to start from. But now this was 30 seconds that I took from the time, because you are the speakers. Let me stay with Antonia. Antonia, could you stay, you know, I'm making all this fuss about fusion energy. What is fusion energy, very shortly, and why is it so important for the world?
So fusion energy is a nuclear process that can in principle be used to generate energy. We know that it's working because that's what's happening in the sun all the time. This is why the sun can send light or energy on our solar panels, actually. The traditional nuclear power plants, we know that there are heavy ion or heavy nuclei, very unstable ones that decay into lighter ones and by that generate energy. In fusion, one tries to do exactly the opposite. So one has very light nuclei and tries to combine them into heavier one, and by that set energy free. Now you can say, okay, whatever, but that really has hard implications, hard practical implications on how this energy system works and how we can use it. So nuclei don't want to fuse, so you need really, really special conditions to get them to fuse on Earth, which makes it really hard, really challenging, especially to get more energy out than you put into generating these special conditions. But if you manage to do so, you have a clean energy source that's can have a base load energy. The fuels are essentially available everywhere, so you don't have any geopolitical dependencies. And the good thing is, as these conditions are so hard to reach, if anything in the system fails, it will just stop fusing, and you will not have any catastrophic incidents as you have in the traditional power plants with fission, nuclear fission. Now, it is really hard to build such a power plant. We are not there yet. It will take at least 2 decades or longer till we can really use that as a power supply for the world. So do we really need it? Yes. So it will definitely not solve our really urgent climate problems we have right now. So we will need solar, we will need wind, but there are continents, complete continents like Africa, like India, where there's a huge population that will still have to get in an electrification state as we are, so we will need more energy in the future. We will have entire industry sectors getting electrified, be it cargo, ships, or whatever, to get rid of traditional energy sources. So we will need more and more energy, and to have a sustainable society with, for example, circular economy, where we have recycling recycling systems, we will need more and more energy. And this is something where fusion in the future will be able to help. And this is why we need it.
Thank you, Antonia. I think you made very clear why we need it. And the great news is the Bavarian government and Minister Blume, they've made a very strong commitment to fusion. You published a master plan. I know you start to work through the master plan. But Markus, the question is, Antonia already mentioned, that there are the potential risks that people might see. How do you plan to engage the public? Because obviously it's very important for the public also to support this new energy that you see as the successor, if I get it right, of nuclear energy.
Well, actually, as today in Germany, I see a completely different attitude towards energy in general and towards all the fields of nuclear power in more detail. Today, people realize that energy is key, and if you do not have a proper energy supply system, then basically everything is in danger. Finally, ultimately, our prosperity here, and therefore people realize that we have to do more, that of course sustainable energy can contribute a lot, but finally, and given the growing demand, we need in the future much more energy. And therefore, we are about to evaluate every single option, and fusion energy is an important one. We have here an ecosystem in Bavaria, especially in Munich, around important institutions. We have a couple of startups here with really substantial approaches towards commercialization. And this is the reason why we have the feeling we should be there, part of the race. We should move forward by strengthening the ecosystem here, by establishing new professorships here, by attracting people from all over the world, and of course by trying to commercialize the research efforts.
Yeah. And as you say, we not only have startups, we have internationally renowned startups, important ones as a rampant.
And by the way, for the development of our country, it's in our DNA that energy supply is key for development, is key for prosperity, and we have the feeling for energy independency or sovereignty in the future, we have to bring more to the table than we have there today.
Yeah. And you would actually think that everyone, because the way you described it, should be pro this, because it's so important for every single person here, for every industry, also for the future. But still, there are a lot of misperceptions out there about fusion. For example, one that I regularly encounter is whenever, I make a positive point about fusion, I get this skepticism, but this is always, cynical skepticism, this is always 30 years away, That's the standard remark. Heike, you're already nodding. So Heike, what are the major misperceptions, that also, make your work a bit more difficult? If you could comment on them and what the truths are.
So I would say many misperceptions have already been overcome in the past years, but what you just touched upon, that fusion is still 30 or 50 years out, I think that is the most common misperception. And I'm strongly convinced that we will see fusion energy in the next 10 to 15 years. And that's not only me. 60% of the fusion companies out there expect to have power plants on the grid by 2035. Yeah. So that is in reach. And I think for each and everyone sitting here, you need to ask yourself the question, will fusion energy disrupt your business model? Will you become a supplier to fusion energy company? Will you be a customer of fusion energy? So it's real, it's happening, and many of you will actually, this will impact your business and what you're doing. And why am I so convinced that we will see that in the next 10 to 15 years? I think on the one side, we have seen major scientific breakthroughs. In laser-based fusion energy, we have seen net energy gain for the first time ever just about a year ago by some scientists at a national ignition facility in the US. So it's proven that you can produce energy by fusion energy on Earth. Scientific breakthroughs. Number two is the underlying technologies that are needed have reached a maturity that is required for fusion energy. In our case, that's short pulse laser technique. And I think the amazing news is that in the past 5 years, we have seen 2 physics Nobel Prizes going to European scientists in the area of short pulse laser technique. This year to Ferenc Krauss here in Munich, and 5 years ago to Gérard Moreau in France. So actually short pulse laser technique is something where we're really leading in Europe. And I think the last point why I believe that fusion energy will be here soon is that there's also growing public and private support for fusion. On the private side, we have seen more investments in the past 2 years in fusion energy companies than the past 20 years before that. So investors have really acknowledged that fusion energy is here and it's happening, and they are also expecting to see returns in the near future. And on the public side, we see growing support from the Bavarian government, also from the federal government. We've seen the BMBF releasing their national strategy for fusion energy this year in summer. We've seen the master plan in September, great event that we had in Garching to announce the master plan. So there is public support now for fusion energy, and I think all these efforts will really lead to power plants. And I think maybe one last point to make this even more tangible is that competitors in the US have already signed first customer contracts. Helion has announced that they are going to deliver electricity to Microsoft in 2028. So that's 5 years from now, and they have already a signed contract. There's already also signed contracts with a steel plant. So there is first customer contracts for fusion energy, and I'm convinced that we will see fusion energy soon with all the benefits that Antonia pointed out before.
Yeah, but so you see, you can grasp it. It's here, and I hope especially the international investors.
It's here, it's happening.
Because we have to scale.
We have to scale, yes, but fusion, it's here and it's happening, and I'm very optimistic when I look into the future.
We do so, yeah. May I ask, Francesco, you're an Italian, yeah? An Italian who's internationally trained, also majorly at MIT and other places. You set up a company in fusion on a different side of magnet fusion accelerators in Bavaria. Could you give us some background, what you think also has been achieved from an international perspective, because there was a deliberate decision, what you feel and what will be needed from his side? Because listening to Antonia said, I thought, all the puzzle pieces are together, but might be there's something, if we look back in 20 years, that we said, gosh, had we done that, that would have been important on top.
It's really valuable to think about the progress in fusion as being milestones, even more than breakthroughs. Breakthroughs are discoveries, and discoveries by their nature are surprising. We're now in a phase of fusion development where we are in R&D progress, and there have been a few milestones that have been really important. One, that Heike was mentioning, has been at the National Ignition Facility in the US. Many lasers have produced really interesting conditions showing that fusion science is within reach, that we understand what's going on. From the perspective of Proxima fusion, we work on stellarators, which are magnetic confinement systems. So we create hot ionized matter at 100 million degrees and more, and we keep it within, you could say, a magnetic bottle. And a key milestone there is made in Germany. It's with the Wendelstein 7X device, which is in northern Germany, but as the name suggests, Wendelstein, for those of you that don't know, is a mountain in Bavaria. This device was designed in Bavaria, and the key institution there is the Max Planck Institute for Plasma Physics. Proxima fusion is the first spin-out in the history of the Max Planck in 60 years of struggles with the complexities of fusion. There, the key milestone was designing W7X, and then, somewhat surprisingly maybe, finding that the design worked, that we could actually meet the incredible manufacturing tolerances, things that are nothing short of unbelievable, like producing massive superconducting magnets, tons heavy, then lifting them, placing them in a position, and finding them, even during operation, they stay within 1.5 millimeters of where they're supposed to be. This is what I would call a milestone. There is nothing surprising about that. It's a good validation of the fact that we know that if we design something, we can make it. So then the next milestones ahead of us are showing that we can build technology to meet our designs of the next stage. So in laser fusion, there is a lot of excitement behind new laser systems that can bridge the gap to a power plant concept. In the case of stellarators, we are now creating as Proxima Fusion this approach, this design that is holistically complete, that has that coherence for net energy production in full steady state. We have as a design point building such a stellarator in Munich by 2031, and the support of the Bavarian government there is nothing short of enabling, the support of the German government, and many agencies that need to get involved. We need all these ecosystem players to help us reach those technology-based milestones.
I think you touch a very important point. It's only possible in an ecosystem, and it's only possible together. So if I would come to the two political players, you mentioned also some measures. I mentioned the master plan. Could you precise what Bavaria would specifically do? Because obviously all governments try to push fusion energy a bit, but you're really heavy going into it. So what would be the major measures you think of? I don't know whether those you mentioned would be considered the major, but what do you personally think are the major measures? And let me ask you, what are your milestones? Which obviously is a difficult question if you're a politician. A member of government, not a politician, but a member of government. How would you measure, your progress in developing, may I call say Fusion Valley? Yeah.
So your first question, I would say it's always the same story. It's all about talents and technology. In the dimension of talents, we have to strengthen our universities and the corresponding institutes here. We are about to establish new chairs, strengthening the field of nuclear technologies, because given the fact that Germany decided years ago to leave the field of nuclear technology, we have also seen a decline in the capabilities at our universities, and there was no demand, and therefore we have to re-strengthen this. So one part is ready to invest in the brightest minds, and the good thing is we have a very strong cluster there working, and the fact that 3 Nobel laureates over the past 20 years in physics came from Munich is a strong sign that this ecosystem is a very strong one when it comes to research. And what we now want to bring to the table by establishing a fusion cluster is the second thing, the commercialization. I feel this is the most important part. The brightest minds are there. The research progress is tremendous, and now we have ready to work on the milestones. And this is the interesting question. We had an in-depth discussion in September. You both joined this discussion, and behind the doors, it was more like, okay, well, everything's very difficult, and maybe in 20 years, and talking about 10 billions and more, and then we tried to refocus it on the question, what is the next milestone? And then we came to the point, okay, the next milestone is a power plant from the design that you can demonstrate, okay, this thing works, and we are talking about maybe about $1 billion and time frame of about 10 years. And this is somehow more feasible than saying, okay, maybe in 20 years and talking about 10 or 15 billions. I think when we're talking about fusion, we should adopt the new approach in all the other fields. New space is a different thing than the space industry was before. So rapid development, smaller, more agile, a little bit smarter, maybe not the 100% solution, but 80% to demonstrate that it could work, and making people fascinated by this technology, attracting new people, more money, and this is the way it could work.
Yeah. Thank you for also mentioning new space, where we are great. Thank you. But it's absolutely great what you're doing, and I take also from the two of them, it's highly motivating and helping, but obviously it also needs the state. Antonia, if I look at you, you will have strong experiences and ideas what it takes on top, from the state. And let me pose you one very general question. Those who have been at the quantum panel before will also have been confronted with the question, which technologies do we take? That we are following various technologies. We have the same here. On the one side, I think that is a difficult question always. On the one side, you want to be technology open, how you start. And on the other side, you shouldn't spread the money everywhere, because then you're not world leading in a field. And you have to find the right balance between those. So may I put you those two questions?
I mean, this is exactly the difficult thing here.
Yeah.
I mean, we need a milestone-based approach. We need small milestones, and with each milestone, we have to evaluate the different approaches, look where we stand, and then coming with that, we have to be able to fail and to stop projects. So we have to say, okay, these projects, or we stop this stream, we stop this funding because this does not make sense. That does not make any sense right now, and we concentrate from there on our money, our efforts in this one or two of less approaches. So failing is one of the important things. A milestone-based plan is something important. But then on the other side, in order to get to these really ambitious time plans or to keep them, we really need to think ahead a few things. For example, with building the lasers, we realized that if we only set up a small test facility, if Marvel would set up a small test facility with a few hundred lasers, we would just buy out the complete worldwide supply chain of specialized optics. So we also have to prepare the supply chains. It would be probably the same for high temperature superconductors, for example. We need to prepare the supply chains to be ready to scale up in the situation where we say, okay, now please go ahead. We need to buy stuff from you to build power plants, or at least test facilities. Even already that might be a problem. And then there are more things that we need to think ahead, like regulation, like education, as you said. Yeah. We will need people in the future, and we need a secure framework for investors where they can see what's happening in the future and how the conditions are.
Thank you, Antonia.
Sorry, and what she just mentioned is super important. Yeah. And what she said was really non-German, because the traditional approach is we have the money for research and bring it to the institutions and then say, good luck. And everyone is doing whatever he wants. Yeah. What we need is a mission approach with the ability to reallocate money if we see one approach maybe is about to fail. And then we have to have the ability to say, okay, then we decide to move forward in the other direction. And that is not what we are today doing, and therefore we need a completely different design also in the world of research, and when we combine it with commercialization as well. So this is super important, and I would really to emphasize this.
Thank you, you do so. And to the journalists in this room, if anyone would report on this panel, if you would please report on this logic too, which I think is innovative. Now, Antonia, you mentioned regulation, and we have to cut a bit short here because what's in time, but you mentioned regulation as an important point. Obviously, the state is not only important for funding, as you said, in education, but also here, because we can only, we can only do this if the regulatory setup is good and other states have gone ahead. Francesco, could you please draw the picture why regulation is important and what we have to do?
For sure. So if we have this picture of a clear mission where we know what are the technologies that are involved, we should have regulation that actually addresses that technology and not our bias against nuclear. As Antonia was mentioning, fusion is a nuclear technology, but it has very little to do with fission, with the nuclear power plants that we know today. If we were to regulate fusion like fission, not only we would do something fairly logical from a technology perspective, but we would actually kill an industry. So I think what we as fusion companies are asking for is not favorable regulation, we're asking for the right regulation. And unless we have a regulation, at some point we're going to not be able to move forward. And right now, the UK has made very rapid strides towards fusion regulation. The United States is moving very aggressively there. In technology, we have some advantages in Germany, in Bavaria in particular. The question now that we face is, are we going to be able to recognize that fusion power plants are much more similar to particle accelerators in terms of how we need to regulate them? If we were to think that this needs to be regulated such that you prevent a catastrophic explosion, that's fairly wrong. There is nothing to explode in these systems. If we were to think about radioactivity leaking all over the place, you don't need to regulate that. It cannot happen. So getting that regulation fast is really important. The sense of urgency to that mission is really important to recognize. So we need to move quickly.
So we look at it, and that's why the public support is also important, because politicians can't come up with new laws if there's no public support. That was
And
the
the good thing is we have actually in Germany no regulation in place, and we should keep this. Yeah?
I think, but this leads to the last. Heike, we have a bit more minutes. We were cut off, and I think we should be pirates because it's so important. Let me give you the last word. We've heard a lot here, and we already had the debate here. How much do we need it, whatsoever? If you would sum up as a leader in this industry, what did we not discuss, or what do you have to underline, to make sure that we really become an international leader in fusion energy here, for the sake of everyone, for the German economy? And I might say, Rafael Laguna, the head of SPRIND, said something, just wrote an article about techno-optimism, where he quoted someone and said, look, our major aim must be to be good ancestors. So the question is, ancestors, so if we look back to this time, 20 years back, and I mentioned the idea, what do you think needs mentioning now?
So I think what we have seen is we have highly motivated companies here. We have growing support from the public side. I think what really needs to happen now to become a leader in fusion energy is, on the one side, we didn't discuss funding that much here, but we need to close the funding gap. It's in deep tech. Getting funding rounds of 50 million, 100 million plus is still very challenging in Europe, and we need to close that gap by having the right incentives in place for private investors to invest in European companies. So closing the funding gap, number one. Number two, having an innovation-friendly regulation, as Francesco said, because that is, besides having money, investors also need to see what is the regulatory framework and is this set up for success. That's number two. And number three is for me to strengthen partnerships. I think fusion energy will not be done alone by any company. It's important to have partnerships between startup, industrial companies, science institutions. At Marble Fusion, we are collaborating with Siemens Energy, for example, on power plant design, with BASF on the chemical compounds that we need for our fusion targets. So building strong partnerships with industry will be super important. And I think if we get those three things fixed, I'm very optimistic about Germany, because if there's one thing that we've always been good at in Germany, it's hardware and entrepreneurship. Yeah. If we look at the Deutsche Mittelstand, that's exactly what made them strong, right? Hardware and entrepreneurship is something we can do, and now we need to have the right ingredients and have the right regulatory frameworks and everything as discussed, and then I'm super optimistic. And I'm optimistic about a world where we have fusion energy, because abundant, clean energy is really what we need in this world, and especially in Germany to stay an industrial leader.
Thank you. So let's stop exactly with all this energy in the room, and I hope you're all optimistic now and support this. Thank you. Thank you.